Now, the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation has joined those condemning the South African government for the decision to hold naval drills with Russia and China. Now, the move has received scathing criticism from several countries, including the USA. Now, the SNDF issued a statement on Thursday saying the move is to strengthen ties between South Africa, Russia and China. Now, the maritime exercise between the three countries will take place in Durban and Richards Bay next month. Let's get you some more reaction from Janet Jobson. Now, she's the CEO of the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation. Thank you so much for joining me, Janet. Now, let's start first and foremost with why do you think this would be detrimental to the country?
You know, one of the things we are really trying to do as a foundation is to ensure that the legacy of the Arch lives on. And something he was profoundly good at was being a voice of moral courage in society. And it's really clear to us that, you know, human solidarity and global human rights are profoundly important to protect at this time. And the fact that the South African government is refusing to speak out against the invasion of Ukraine and is choosing to side itself so closely with particularly the Russian military really puts to shame our constitution. It puts to shame the idea that we're committed to human rights, that we're committed to peace and global flourishing.
Now, you know, Janet, many would say that, you know, not having these military drills with China and Russia could send a wrong message to those countries, seeing that we had military drills with the USA not so long ago, if I'm not mistaken, in June or July last year. Don't you think if we don't do this military exercise with them, it could maybe possibly show Russia and China that, hey, South Africa might be taking a stance here on this whole war and maybe siding with USA and Europe?
Well, it's about time South Africa took a stance on this war. You know, Russia has invaded another country, completely destroying their sovereignty. It's all of the excuses about why the invasion took place, the Nazism in Ukraine, so-called NATO sort of pressure behind the scenes. None of that actually matters, because what's happening is that Russia is trying to colonize another country, and they are bombing civilians. They're trying to bomb infrastructure so that people's lives, so people are dying. They don't have access to electricity. They don't have access to basic services. And that is an outrage. And the South African government absolutely should be willing to stand and say that the killing and the threats on civilians and the invasion of another country is outrageous. And we should be able to have partnerships with countries in which we can stand on equal terms and criticize each other when we're doing things that are wrong. And we really think the South African government needs to step up and start speaking truth to power, speak to our partners as partners, not just be subservient to them in our relationships with them.
These drills take place biannually, if I'm not mistaken. We've had drills with China and Russia in 2019. It's just, don't you think it's just maybe unfortunate that, you know, the Ukraine war is taking place now during this time when we are supposed to have these drills? And also speaking, you know, or hearing from other military experts that, you know, these drills could benefit South Africa in a way, because we don't have the best defense systems in the world. We don't have the best military in the world. So these drills are necessary for us to build our own protection and to learn from Russia, China, but also the USA, and still keep the middle ground.
I mean, I think what's really important is to look at the language that the SANDF used themselves, and they called this an exercise in order to strengthen our close relationship with Russia. Now, if we are trying to strengthen our relationship with an aggressor state who has shown that they have absolutely no regard for sovereignty and no regard for civilians' lives, then I think it's really important we take a look in the mirror and ask ourselves whether we're truly committed to human rights and whether we're truly committed to peace and global solidarity. You know, the whole world came together to support South Africa in the anti-apartheid movement, and the Arch was such a powerful voice against apartheid. And we really are free today. We have a democracy because of global solidarity. And so the idea that we now would stand with the aggressor, that we would stand with an invasion force, is truly outrageous and certainly goes against the principles enshrined in our constitution, and that the ANC and you know, people in the liberation struggle fought so dearly for.
Again, having to play devil's advocate here, Janet, mentioning the liberation, the struggle, apartheid. Russia was one of those countries that helped the ANC during those times as well, supported them in a way in the fight against apartheid. When Europe and the West didn't really do much at that time.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to look back on history and learn from history. But I think if I could just share the best example of the Arch was that he never allowed friendship to stand in the way of legitimate critique when there was a principled issue going on. You know, he criticized the Mandela government for the arms deal. He criticized the Zuma government. He criticized the Mbeki government. He was willing to criticize the church. You know, he was the Archbishop of the Anglican Church, and he called it out and said, "I will not worship a homophobic God." And that is the kind of principled leadership we need, where we aren't saying, who are we getting favors from? Who helped us in the past? But we ask ourselves, what is right and wrong? And in this case, it's become abundantly clear. It may have been somewhat contested at the beginning, at the outset of the invasion in February last year. There were lots of claims made by Russia. It was a small operation. But it is abundantly clear now that this is a war of aggression, and it is an attempt to become a neo-colonial force over the people of Ukraine. And there should be nothing that stops us from telling our friends the truth. And the truth is that we should not stand for these human rights violations.
I agree, but to a certain extent, because South Africa, we did take the stance to not be involved in this war whatsoever. We do have great relations with Europe. They are our biggest trading partner. Of course, we need them as much as they need us. Russia, of course, also we have good relations there, as we just mentioned. But of course, we are not part of NATO as such. So us taking, a stance here could be damaging for South Africa, as we are not a NATO country. And not saying, we can't really choose a side here, because that could be detrimental for us if we do choose to be against this war, or even for it, whatever stance we take. It could be in South Africa's, not in our best will, seeing that we are not really part of NATO. So what protection are we getting from the USA and its NATO allies in this situation?
Yeah, I think one of the great disservices we do to the people of Ukraine is to only frame this as some kind of geopolitical battle between Russia and NATO or the West, because that is how Russia would like us to see it. And if we look at it in that way, then suddenly the question becomes, are you siding with the West or are you siding with Russia? And the actual people of Ukraine stop being clearly the center of the conversation. So, for the last 6 months, we've partnered with the Ukrainian Association of South Africa to put the experience of the civilians of Ukraine on the table and in public, because too often the conversation goes straight into this, are we with America or are we with Russia? We've obviously shown as a country, our government has chosen, they've said they're neutral, but they have obviously chosen the side of Russia. And that means we aren't a legitimate force to negotiate or play a mediating role anyway, because what signals have we given Ukraine that we can be trusted to be a neutral mediator of this conflict? We've obviously made that choice, and even if we won't admit it, it's entirely clear to all of us in South Africa and to the world that is the decision we've made. And we should stop pretending that somehow we believe there's a mediation role for us, because we've lost all legitimacy with the Ukrainian people. And that's a huge tragedy, because we really should be standing up for the rights of ordinary human beings everywhere around the world.
Thank you so much, Janet. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. Janet Jobson, CEO of the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation.